Are you constantly scrolling, feeling like everyone else has life figured out while you're quietly falling behind? That heavy sense of not being enough doesn't come from lack of ability or effort. It comes from comparison culture, a system designed to keep you measuring your worth against carefully curated versions of other people's lives. And the longer you stay trapped in it, the more your confidence erodes, piece by piece. In this audiobook, you'll learn how to break free from that cycle completely. You'll understand where comparison really comes from, why it feels so powerful, and how to dismantle its influence at the root. More importantly, you'll learn how to rebuild confidence from the inside out by shifting control back to yourself, redefining success on your own terms, and developing a resilient mindset that no longer depends on external validation to feel secure. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Perfection. At some point, most people start believing that everyone else is doing better than they are. Not because it's true, but because that's the picture constantly placed in front of them. The modern world runs on curated images, edited narratives, and carefully selected moments that present life as polished, effortless, and perpetually successful. What you rarely see is the confusion, doubt, failed attempts, and quiet struggles that exist behind every highlight. This illusion of perfection creates a dangerous distortion. You begin comparing your everyday reality, filled with uncertainty, unfinished goals, and emotional ups and downs, to someone else's most impressive moments. That comparison is never fair, yet it feels convincing. Over time, this imbalance quietly rewires how you see yourself. Confidence doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes slowly through repeated exposure to unrealistic standards that were never meant to represent real life. Social platforms are not neutral spaces. They are engineered to reward attention-grabbing content, not honesty. The posts that rise to the top are the ones that provoke admiration, envy, or aspiration. This creates a feedback loop where perfection appears normal and imperfection feels like failure. The brain, wired to seek belonging and status, absorbs this information without questioning its accuracy. You don't consciously decide to feel inadequate. The environment trains you to feel that way. The psychological cost of this constant comparison is significant. It fosters chronic dissatisfaction, even in moments of genuine progress. Achievements start feeling smaller. Effort feels invisible. No matter how much you improve, there's always someone ahead, making your growth seem insignificant by comparison. This doesn't motivate excellence, it drains it. When confidence is built on comparison, it becomes fragile because there will always be someone faster, richer, more attractive, or more accomplished. What's especially damaging is how comparison culture disconnects you from your own journey. Instead of measuring progress against where you started, you measure it against someone else's middle or end point. You lose sight of context, their resources, timing, background, and unseen support systems. You internalize outcomes without understanding the variables that created them. That misunderstanding turns into self-blame. This illusion also reshapes identity. Instead of asking, "Who am I becoming?" the question quietly shifts to, "How do I rank?" Your sense of worth becomes external, conditional, and unstable. Confidence stops being something you build and starts being something you borrow, dependent on likes, approval, or perceived superiority. When those disappear, so does your sense of self. Recognizing the illusion is the first act of freedom. Noticing that perfection is staged, selective, and algorithmically amplified allows you to step back from its emotional grip. The goal isn't to reject inspiration or disconnect from the world completely. It's to stop mistaking performance for reality and comparison for truth. Confidence cannot survive in an environment where you're constantly told you're behind. To grow it, you must first understand how the illusion of perfection was constructed and why it was never meant to serve you. This awareness doesn't fix everything instantly, but it creates space. And in that space, a more grounded, self-directed confidence can finally begin to form. Chapter 2. Dismantling the Roots of Comparison. Comparison didn't begin with social media. Long before screens and algorithms, humans learned to measure themselves against others as a way to survive. Observing who was stronger, faster, or more skilled once helped determine safety, status, and belonging. In small communities, this instinct had limits. Today, that same wiring is exposed to millions of people at once, far beyond what the mind was ever designed to process. Modern comparison culture exploits this ancient mechanism. Instead of helping you navigate your immediate environment, it pulls your attention toward endless reference points. The result is constant self-evaluation without context. You're no longer comparing yourself to peers walking a similar path, but to global outliers presented as normal. Over time, this overload creates chronic dissatisfaction, not because you're failing, but because the standard keeps shifting. Internal triggers play a major role in keeping this cycle alive. Insecurity, past experiences of rejection, and the fear of being left behind all act as emotional accelerants. When those feelings surface, comparison becomes a coping mechanism, a way to check where you stand. Unfortunately, it delivers the opposite of reassurance. Each comparison deepens the sense that you're lacking something essential, even when you're not. The need for external validation intensifies this effect. When self-worth depends on approval, attention, or recognition, comparison feels unavoidable. You start scanning others' lives for confirmation that you're doing enough, growing fast enough, or becoming someone worth noticing. This creates a dependency that weakens confidence. The more you seek validation, the less capable you feel of generating it internally. External pressures amplify these vulnerabilities. Advertising, productivity culture, and social expectations constantly reinforce narrow definitions of success. Wealth, visibility, and status are framed as universal goals, even when they conflict with your values or priorities. When you unconsciously adopt these standards, comparison feels mandatory. You're no longer asking what you want. You're measuring how well you're performing someone else's script. Social media algorithms intensify this pressure by prioritizing content that triggers emotional response. Comparison-inducing posts perform well because they keep you engaged. This isn't a moral failure on your part. It's a system optimized for attention. The more aware you become of this dynamic, the easier it is to separate your self-perception from what's being presented to you. Dismantling comparison starts with recognizing that it isn't a personal flaw, but a learned behavior reinforced by environment. Once you see the machinery behind it, you can stop blaming yourself for feeling inadequate and start questioning the standards being imposed on you. Confidence grows not by winning comparisons, but by stepping out of the game entirely. When you understand the roots of comparison, you reclaim agency. You shift from reacting to external signals to observing them with distance. This doesn't eliminate insecurity overnight, but weakens its grip. And as comparison loses its authority, space opens for a more stable, self-directed form of confidence to take its place. Chapter 3. Reclaiming your internal scoreboard. Confidence becomes fragile when it depends on external measurement. The moment your worth is tied to how you rank, how you appear, or how you're perceived, stability disappears. There will always be new benchmarks, louder voices, and higher standards waiting to replace the last one. This is why lasting confidence can only be built on an internal scoreboard, one you define, control, and update based on your own values. An internal scoreboard begins with clarity. You have to decide what actually matters to you, separate from what is celebrated publicly. This requires honest reflection, not ambition borrowed from someone else's life. Success looks different depending on your priorities, season of life, and long-term vision. When those aren't clearly defined, comparison rushes in to fill the gap. Without personal metrics, you default to collective ones. Self-awareness is the foundation of this process. Understanding your strengths, limitations, and natural inclinations allows you to set goals that align with who you are, not who you think you should be. This doesn't mean lowering standards. It means making them relevant. When effort is aligned with identity, progress feels meaningful instead of performative. Shifting from perfection to progress is a critical mindset change. Perfection depends on external approval. Progress depends on honesty. When you measure growth by improvement rather than outcome, confidence becomes resilient. Small wins start to matter again. Consistency becomes more valuable than comparison. You begin to notice how far you've come instead of how far others appear to be ahead. An internal scoreboard also changes how you interpret failure. Instead of seeing setbacks as evidence of inadequacy, they become data points. Feedback replaces judgment. This creates emotional safety, which is essential for confidence to grow. When you're not afraid of failing publicly or privately, you're more willing to take risks aligned with your goals. This shift requires intentional boundaries. You cannot maintain an internal standard while constantly absorbing external noise. That doesn't mean isolation, but it does mean discernment. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every outcome deserves emotional weight. Learning what to ignore is as important as learning what to pursue. As your internal scoreboard strengthens, something subtle but powerful happens. Motivation becomes steadier. You stop needing comparison to push you forward. Satisfaction comes from alignment rather than applause. Confidence stops fluctuating with external circumstances and starts rooting itself in self-trust. Reclaiming your internal scoreboard doesn't make you immune to doubt, but it changes your relationship with it. Doubt becomes a signal, not a verdict. And from that position, confidence becomes something you generate, not something you wait to receive. Chapter 4. Creating a comparison-free zone. Breaking free from comparison isn't about willpower alone. It's about environment. Confidence struggles to grow when your surroundings constantly reinforce unrealistic standards and external validation. If comparison is the air you breathe, self-doubt becomes unavoidable. Creating a comparison-free zone means intentionally shaping your inputs so your mind has room to recalibrate. One of the most impactful changes you can make is how you engage with digital spaces. Social media isn't inherently harmful, but unfiltered exposure is. Every image, story, and update competes for your attention, often presenting a distorted version of reality. Strategic use matters more than total avoidance. Unfollowing accounts that trigger insecurity isn't weakness, it's self-respect. Curating your feed turns passive consumption into conscious choice. A comparison-free zone also requires changing how you consume information. Constant updates about other people's achievements can quietly reset your expectations. You start believing you should be further along, even when your path is unfolding exactly as it should. Limiting exposure doesn't mean ignoring inspiration. It means choosing sources that motivate without diminishing your sense of worth. Mindfulness plays a critical role here. Comparison often operates automatically, without awareness. The mind jumps from observation to judgment in seconds. Learning to notice that pattern creates a pause, and in that pause, you regain control. You don't need to suppress the thought. Simply recognizing it weakens its influence. Awareness turns reflex into choice. Self-compassion is what sustains this shift. Many people try to overcome comparison by criticizing themselves for feeling insecure. That only deepens the cycle. Confidence grows through kindness, not punishment. When you acknowledge discomfort without judgment, you remove the emotional fuel that keeps comparison alive. Progress becomes safer, more sustainable, and less exhausting. Your physical and social environments matter just as much. Surrounding yourself with people who celebrate growth instead of status changes how you measure success. Conversations that focus on learning, effort, and purpose reinforce internal standards. In contrast, environments obsessed with appearance, competition, or constant comparison quietly erode confidence, no matter how strong your mindset is. Creating a comparison-free zone doesn't require perfection. You'll still encounter moments of insecurity. The difference is how quickly you recover. With fewer triggers and stronger awareness, those moments lose their power. They become temporary, not defining. When your environment supports your internal scoreboard, confidence stops feeling fragile. It becomes something you protect, nurture, and grow deliberately. And in that space, you begin to experience what authentic self-assurance actually feels like: steady, grounded, and self-directed. Chapter 5. Unlocking Authentic Confidence. Authentic confidence is not loud, performative, or dependent on constant reassurance. It is quiet, stable, and internally generated. When comparison loses its grip, confidence doesn't suddenly appear. It is revealed. What was once buried under external expectations and self-doubt begins to surface naturally, without force or pretense. At its core, authentic confidence comes from self-trust. This means believing in your ability to navigate uncertainty, adapt to challenges, and recover from setbacks. It's not about certainty of outcome, but confidence in your capacity to respond. Comparison undermines this trust by shifting focus outward. When you stop measuring yourself against others, you create space to build belief in your own judgment and resilience. One of the most overlooked elements of confidence is emotional regulation. People who appear confident aren't free from fear or doubt. They're skilled at responding to it. They don't interpret discomfort as failure. Instead, they see it as a natural part of growth. This mindset reduces emotional volatility, making confidence more consistent rather than situational. Vulnerability plays a critical role in this process. Comparison culture teaches you to hide imperfections, curate strengths, and minimize struggle. Authentic confidence does the opposite. It allows you to acknowledge limitations without attaching shame. When you stop pretending to be invulnerable, pressure eases. Growth accelerates. Confidence strengthens because it's rooted in honesty rather than image. Another key factor is autonomy. Confidence increases when your actions align with your values instead of external approval. Every time you make a choice based on what matters to you, even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular, you reinforce self-respect. Over time, these decisions compound. Confidence becomes a byproduct of integrity, not achievement. Purpose also deepens confidence. When your efforts are connected to something meaningful, comparison loses relevance. You're no longer trying to outperform others. You're trying to fulfill your own vision. This shift creates focus and persistence. Progress feels satisfying because it's aligned, not because it's impressive. Confidence grows through repetition, not revelation. Small, consistent actions matter more than dramatic breakthroughs. Showing up when motivation is low. Following through on commitments to yourself. Practicing self-discipline without self-criticism. Each of these reinforces the belief that you can rely on yourself. And that belief is the foundation of confidence. As authentic confidence develops, external validation stops feeling necessary. Praise becomes appreciated, not required. Criticism becomes information, not identity. You begin to move through life with less friction because your sense of worth isn't constantly being negotiated. This is the shift comparison culture never offers. Confidence that doesn't fluctuate with trends, attention, or approval. A form of self-assurance built on trust, alignment, and resilience. And once established, it becomes one of the most powerful internal assets you can develop: steady, self-sustaining, and deeply personal. Chapter 6. Strengthening Confidence Through Daily Discipline. Confidence is often mistaken for a personality trait, something you either have or don't. In reality, it's built through behavior. More specifically, through daily discipline. The actions you repeat, especially when no one is watching, shape how you see yourself. Over time, those actions either reinforce self-trust or quietly weaken it. Discipline creates evidence. Each small promise you keep to yourself becomes proof that you are reliable. This proof matters more than motivation or positive thinking. When you consistently follow through, even in simple ways, confidence grows naturally. You don't need to convince yourself you're capable. Your behavior confirms it. Comparison culture interrupts this process by pulling attention away from your own routines. You start judging your progress instead of sustaining it. Daily discipline shifts focus back to controllables. You can't control how others perform or progress, but you can control how you show up today. That shift reduces anxiety and restores a sense of agency. Consistency is more important than intensity. Many people sabotage confidence by setting unrealistic expectations, then failing to meet them. This creates a cycle of self-criticism. Discipline works when it's sustainable. Small, manageable habits repeated over time build far more confidence than occasional bursts of effort followed by burnout. Structure also plays a key role. When your day has rhythm, decision fatigue decreases. You waste less energy debating what to do and more energy doing it. This stability supports emotional regulation, making it easier to stay grounded when external comparisons arise. Predictable routines create a psychological anchor. Another overlooked aspect of discipline is boundaries. Saying no is a form of self-respect. Protecting your time, energy, and focus reinforces your internal standards. Each boundary you maintain strengthens your belief that your needs and goals matter. Confidence grows not only from what you do, but from what you refuse to tolerate. Discipline also reframes failure. When you view confidence as a result of consistent action, setbacks become temporary disruptions, not defining moments. Missing a day doesn't erase progress. Quitting does. This mindset reduces fear of imperfection and encourages persistence. As daily discipline compounds, something subtle shifts. You stop needing external reassurance because your confidence is grounded in experience. You've seen yourself follow through. You've navigated discomfort. You've adapted. This creates a calm assurance that doesn't need to be announced or validated. Confidence built through discipline is quiet but powerful. It doesn't depend on comparison or applause. It comes from alignment between intention and action, repeated daily, reinforced over time, and strengthened through consistency. Chapter 7. Building emotional resilience against comparison. Even with strong habits and clear boundaries, moments of comparison will still appear. Confidence isn't about eliminating these moments. It's about responding to them differently. Emotional resilience is what allows confidence to remain intact when external pressure, criticism, or self-doubt arises. Without resilience, confidence becomes conditional. With it, confidence becomes durable. Resilience begins with emotional literacy. Many people experience discomfort from comparison but never name it. They label it as motivation, pressure, or ambition, when it's often insecurity or fear beneath the surface. Learning to identify what you're actually feeling reduces its intensity. When emotions are named, they lose some of their power. Comparison often triggers automatic thoughts that feel factual but aren't. Thoughts like, I'm behind, I should be further along, or I'm not enough, appear quickly and convincingly. Resilience develops when you challenge these narratives instead of accepting them as truth. This doesn't mean replacing them with forced positivity, but with perspective. Asking better questions creates emotional distance. Self-talk plays a central role here. The way you speak to yourself during moments of comparison determines how long those moments last. Harsh internal dialogue deepens insecurity. Neutral, grounded language shortens recovery time. Resilient confidence isn't built on self-criticism. It's built on self-regulation. Another key component is tolerance for discomfort. Growth often brings temporary insecurity, especially when you're stepping outside familiar roles. Comparison becomes louder during transition periods. Resilience means allowing discomfort without interpreting it as failure. When you stop resisting the feeling, it passes more quickly. Perspective also strengthens emotional resilience. You're always seeing a fraction of someone else's life, not the full picture. Remembering this doesn't eliminate comparison, but it reframes it. You shift from judgment to curiosity, from self-blame to understanding. Support systems matter more than many realize. Confidence grows faster in environments where honesty is allowed. Having people who normalize struggle instead of glorifying outcomes reduces the pressure to perform. Emotional resilience is reinforced through connection, not isolation. Over time, resilient confidence changes your default response. Comparison no longer triggers panic or withdrawal. It becomes a signal to reconnect with your internal standards. Recovery becomes faster. Emotional stability increases. Resilience doesn't make you immune to insecurity. It makes you capable of moving through it. And that capability is one of the strongest forms of confidence you can develop: calm, grounded, and self-sustaining. Chapter 7. Building emotional resilience against comparison. Even with strong habits, clear boundaries, and an internal scoreboard, comparison will still show up from time to time. Confidence isn't about eliminating comparison entirely. It's about no longer being controlled by it. Emotional resilience is what allows confidence to stay intact when external pressure, criticism, or self-doubt inevitably arises. Resilience begins with awareness of emotional triggers. Comparison often appears during vulnerable moments, when you're tired, uncertain, transitioning, or stepping into something new. In those moments, the mind looks for reference points to regain a sense of control. Recognizing this pattern prevents you from mistaking a temporary emotional state for a permanent truth. Many comparison-driven thoughts feel factual, but are actually emotional interpretations. Thoughts like "I'm behind," "I should be further along," or "I'm not enough" are not observations. They're conclusions formed under stress. Emotional resilience grows when you pause before accepting those conclusions. Instead of arguing with them, you examine them. That examination weakens their authority. Internal dialogue plays a powerful role in this process. Harsh self-talk intensifies emotional reactions and extends their duration. Calm, neutral language creates space for regulation. You don't need to reassure yourself excessively. You need to speak to yourself accurately. Accuracy stabilizes confidence far more effectively than forced positivity. Resilience also depends on your ability to tolerate discomfort without interpreting it as failure. Growth is uncomfortable by nature. When comparison surfaces during periods of expansion, it's often a sign that you're stretching beyond familiar limits. Interpreting discomfort as danger causes retreat. Interpreting it as information allows progress. Perspective further strengthens emotional resilience. You are always comparing your internal experience to someone else's external presentation. That imbalance creates distorted conclusions. Remembering that you are seeing a fraction of their reality doesn't eliminate comparison, but it restores fairness to the equation. Emotional resilience is reinforced through healthy connection. Being around people who normalize effort, struggle, and gradual progress reduces the pressure to perform. Confidence becomes easier to maintain when honesty is welcomed and perfection is not expected. Over time, resilient confidence changes your default response. Comparison no longer triggers panic or self-doubt spirals. It becomes a cue to return to your internal standards. Recovery becomes faster. Emotional stability increases. Resilience doesn't mean being unaffected. It means being capable. And that capability is one of the strongest forms of confidence you can build: steady, grounded, and independent of external validation. Chapter 8. redefining success on your own terms. Confidence weakens when success is defined externally. The moment your standards are borrowed, your self-worth becomes negotiable. Redefining success is not about lowering expectations or rejecting ambition. It's about choosing metrics that reflect your values, priorities, and reality. When success is self-defined, confidence becomes stable instead of situational. Most definitions of success are inherited unconsciously. They come from culture, family expectations, social media, and productivity narratives that equate worth with visibility or constant achievement. Without questioning these definitions, you may pursue goals that look impressive but feel empty. That disconnect erodes confidence because effort without meaning leads to burnout rather than fulfillment. Redefining success begins with values. Values act as internal anchors. They clarify what matters when external noise becomes loud. When your goals align with your values, progress feels satisfying even when it's slow or invisible. Confidence grows because your actions are coherent. You're moving in a direction that makes sense to you. This shift also changes how you evaluate progress. Instead of asking, "How do I compare?" you ask, "Am I improving in ways that matter to me?" Progress becomes personal, not competitive. Small, consistent improvements gain significance. The journey itself becomes reinforcing, not just the outcome. Another important element is redefining timelines. Comparison culture pressures you to achieve quickly. It suggests that if success hasn't happened by a certain age or stage, something is wrong. This artificial urgency undermines patience and confidence. When you set your own pace, you remove unnecessary pressure and create room for sustainable growth. Redefining success also reframes failure. Failure stops being evidence of inadequacy and becomes part of the learning process. When success is self-defined, mistakes don't threaten identity. They inform strategy. This perspective creates emotional safety, which encourages experimentation and resilience. Autonomy strengthens confidence further. When you pursue goals because they matter to you, not because they impress others, motivation becomes intrinsic. You're less affected by opinions, trends, or shifting standards. Confidence stabilizes because it's anchored internally. Living by your own definition of success doesn't isolate you from society. It grounds you within it. You still engage, learn, and grow, but without surrendering your self-worth to comparison. You move with intention rather than pressure. When success is yours to define, confidence stops being fragile. It becomes an expression of alignment, steady, authentic, and deeply rooted in who you are and what you value. Chapter 9. Living confidently in a world that constantly compares. Even after redefining success and strengthening your internal standards, you still live in a world that thrives on comparison. Confidence isn't built in isolation. It's maintained in real environments, real conversations, and real pressure. The goal isn't to escape comparison culture completely. It's to move through it without losing yourself. One of the most important skills you can develop is selective engagement. Not every trend, opinion, or benchmark deserves your attention. Confidence grows when you learn to choose what influences you and what doesn't. This discernment protects your mental energy and prevents unnecessary self-doubt from taking root. Social comparison often shows up subtly in everyday interactions. Conversations about achievement, status, or productivity can trigger internal evaluation before you realize it. Living confidently means noticing these moments without reacting automatically. You don't need to compete, justify, or diminish yourself. Presence alone is enough. Confidence also changes how you respond to praise and criticism. Praise becomes information, not identity. Criticism becomes feedback, not a verdict. When your sense of worth isn't dependent on either, emotional stability increases. You're able to listen, learn, and move forward without internalizing external judgments. Another key aspect is patience. Confidence matures slowly. In a culture obsessed with speed and visibility, patience can feel like falling behind. In reality, it's a strategic advantage. Sustainable growth requires time. When you stop rushing to validate yourself, confidence deepens naturally. Living confidently also means allowing others to succeed without self-comparison. Someone else's progress doesn't diminish yours. Learning to genuinely celebrate others without self-judgment reflects a secure internal foundation. Confidence expands when competition is replaced with clarity. Boundaries remain essential. Even as confidence strengthens, you must continue protecting it. This means revisiting digital habits, social circles, and commitments as your life evolves. What supported you before may no longer align. Adjusting boundaries is a sign of growth, not inconsistency. Over time, confidence becomes less about how you feel and more about how you act. You make decisions based on values rather than fear. You move forward despite uncertainty. You remain grounded even when comparison surrounds you. Living confidently in a comparative world isn't about dominance or detachment. It's about steadiness, and that steadiness allows you to show up fully, focused, resilient, and secure in who you are becoming. Chapter 10. Sustaining Confidence for the Long Term. Confidence that lasts is not built through dramatic moments or constant reinforcement. It's sustained through alignment between how you think, how you act, and what you value. Long-term confidence is less about intensity and more about consistency. It's what remains when motivation fades and external validation is quiet. One of the most important shifts at this stage is understanding that confidence is cyclical. There will be periods where it feels strong and periods where it feels distant. This fluctuation doesn't mean you're regressing. It means you're human. Sustainable confidence comes from not panicking during low moments and not becoming dependent on high ones. Reflection plays a critical role in maintaining confidence. Regularly revisiting your internal standards, values, and progress keeps you grounded. This isn't about self-critique, it's about recalibration. As you grow, your priorities evolve. Confidence stays strong when your goals evolve with you instead of trapping you in outdated expectations. Self-trust deepens through long-term integrity. Each time you act in alignment with your values, you reinforce a quiet belief that you can rely on yourself. Over time, this trust becomes unshakable. Even when outcomes are uncertain, your confidence remains intact because it's rooted in character, not circumstance. Letting go is another essential component. Confidence weakens when you cling to identities, goals, or comparisons that no longer serve you. Growth requires release. Being willing to redefine yourself without self-judgment allows confidence to adapt rather than fracture. Rest also matters more than most people admit. Chronic exhaustion amplifies insecurity. When you're depleted, comparison feels louder and self-doubt feels heavier. Sustaining confidence means respecting your limits and recognizing rest as a form of discipline, not avoidance. As confidence matures, it becomes quieter. You stop needing to prove yourself. You become more comfortable with uncertainty and less reactive to external signals. This calm presence is often mistaken for indifference, but it's actually deep self-assurance. Ultimately, confidence that lasts is not something you protect aggressively. It's something you live from. It shows up in how you make decisions, handle challenges, and treat yourself over time. When comparison loses its influence and alignment becomes your guide, confidence stops being something you chase and becomes something you carry forward steadily and intentionally into every season of your life.